hey, the economy contracted for the first time in 3 years. Is that going to be a good thing in terms of what it makes Fed Chair Powell do? Or is it something that causes the markets to continue the slide that they began today? We'll have answers for you on today's Rebel's Edge. Bang. Shrinkage. It was cold. The water was cold.
That was phenomenal.
We figured you guys would remember that famous Seinfeld episode about shrinkage, because that's what happened to the U.S. economy. The first time we've seen shrinkage since 2022. Mm-hmm. But it's also, Pete, pretty damn predictable when we're just importing everything we can to get it in before the tariffs really take effect. Yeah. And pretty much, I mean, we were just with a bunch of folks from LA, Pete, and they said the ports are jammed because everybody brought in everything they could before those things start, which means, of course, that our economy isn't growing as fast. But I imagine we'll see a little bit of a bounce back in the next reading, Pete. So people that are betting against the U.S., I don't think that's a good bet right now.
That's a terrible bet. It's a ridiculous bet. And I think they should all know the fact that the imports only surged 41%, John. So, yeah.
41%.
Were people looking for something like this? Absolutely, because they didn't know what the future would hold. And we still don't, quite frankly. But there is all the talk going on out there. And I think that's one of the things that's helped buoy the market a little bit, John, maybe, is the fact that as bad as this number is, there's still talk of getting some deals done. And if that's the case, this thing could turn around in a hurry, I would say.
Yeah, that's the macro minute right there, folks. It could turn around in a hurry. And as we go into fantastic futures, I'm going to say, Pete, that maybe the VIX, would you expect, because we were down 400 in the NASDAQ right away this morning, and we've cut that in half. So do you think the VIX is a pretty accurate predictor, Pete, of people's fear or at least of uncertainty?
Yeah, and it's been interesting, John, because once we've gotten to the point where we are right now, still, actually, we're trading anywhere between a range of, call it 24 and as high as 28 today alone. So that's kind of your marker. But I think that being said, we're going one direction or the other, John, and obviously it's going to be news driven, but are we going to get back down to 20 and maybe even below 20, or do we kick it back up to 30? And we could see a little bit of the signs of the 30 this morning with some of the concerns about some of those numbers that were coming out. So I think that the reality is people need to take a deep breath. They need to understand what's going on outside in the markets and what we are going to do. And as they do that, we'll see how that volatility actually will continue to be the driver of where we're going, because that's going to give us a lot more. And it's not just fear. It's just looking at the markets and how they're going to trade. And I think that's also an important part of it. It's not just fear. A lot of this has to do with the amount of movement. I mean, look at what the Dow did today. Look what the S&P has done today, from the lows to the highs and everything in between. I think the VIX has been very, very spot on.
Yeah. And Pete, yesterday, for the first time in a long time, we saw big buying of puts on the VIX, which, by the way, folks, somebody put a very big bet on that the VIX goes back into the teens. Was that in the June timeframe, Pete? I forget.
They were going out in time, yeah.
Yep. So that would be something that would likely happen on a market rally, not a market collapse. Right. All right, let's talk about Snap, because Snap came out with a narrower than expected loss, Pete. But it was still a loss. I can't hardly believe that this company can't get to profitability, Pete, but they can't. They have not been able to. And revenue exceeded expectations. 14% was their year-over-year increase, 9% growth in the daily active users and so forth. But Pete, when are they going to get to profit?
And that's something we bring up all the time. You and I talk about that. I mean, when you're looking at these companies and they've been public as long as they have, a name like Snap, for instance, when will they make money? And the problem is they just seem to continue to burn money and burn money and burn money. And that's been kind of the way it's been going. But, you know, John, it's interesting. It was already down 20, well, including today, down 28% year to date. So it's been getting hammered. Are there a lot of shorts in there? Yeah, I would call 5 to 9% a pretty decent sized short interest as well. So everywhere you look, when you look at the numbers that they put up, they looked pretty good. But one of the things that I didn't really like, John, was they said, geez, this is so uncertain with the macro environment. Hey, you know what? Sometimes you got to have guts and sometimes you got to give people what they want to know. And that's what we've seen, I think, in the earnings season so far. We've had companies that have actually come out. They've given us what they project going forward in the guidance, but they've also said, and here's what it looks like with the tariffs. Here's what it looks like without the tariffs. I think you want those guys as your CEO because they're planning for the future as opposed to saying, you know what, it's really uncertain out there. We have no idea what we're going to do. And that's what it feels like they're telling us, John. And a lot of analysts got pretty ticked off about this thing because multiple analysts actually went out and said, you know what, price targets, we're bringing them down. So I think that tells you the direction for Snap.
It's a $7 stock right now, folks.
Yeah.
And even though the high is only 17, this thing has seen far better days in the past than it's looking at right now, Pete. So I don't blame those companies for taking down the guidance. All right, how about First Solar? Down hard today, tumbled after Q1 earnings missed expectations. Then, Pete, they cut full year guidance as well. And yeah, some of the stuff that First Solar and other solar makers sell gets made over in China. So you would expect that their profitability might be impacted by that. But wow, this is a pretty big drop out of FSLR today.
It's ugly. And I'll tell you, John, when you said they cut, I wouldn't even say they cut. I'd say they took out an axe and started beating on this thing in terms of what the guidance really started to look like. I mean, they really pulled back in a big way. The shorts are there. They're actually smiling pretty well today. And I don't know that they're yet, John, going to start buying back. That's something I think we'll have to keep an eye on is, do we start to see any sort of a trigger to show us that the shorts want to cover? Because so far, I don't think we're seeing that. And by the way, this is another one where the analysts came out and they said, you know what, these price targets, we're bringing them down. These guys, they've done a lot of interesting things, but the cuts going into 2025, you know, it's just something that they've, I think, had to embrace the idea that things aren't looking great and they're going to make some cuts, and the price target cuts is another part of this whole thing. But the axe that they took out, John, in terms of what they were doing with that guidance, that was ugly for sure, because they brought it down in a big way.
Well, then we've got Super Micro, Pete, and SMCI is one that I actually love trading this one,
yeah.
But I trade it. I don't really want to own it for the long term because I think some of the valuations here might be a little high. And they just took care of that today by shaving 14% off the stock. It closed yesterday at 36, Pete. On these earnings and the guidance, it dropped all the way down to 28.78 today. Pretty big drop. It's right now at about 31, and I wouldn't exactly be breaking my arm to buy it right here, Pete.
I'm with you, John. You know, there's a lot of different things that came out of what they were talking about. And it's, you know, the net sales, that was something that didn't look very good. And you look at the outlook and the significantly below what the outlook had been. I mean, for the results, there's nothing really in this call that really makes you want to say, you know, I think this is a good time to start buying. I agree with you. I look at this one, there's huge short interest in here. I don't think they need to start covering anytime too soon, but the stock down 16%, their cash burns about $2.5 billion. There's a lot of issues that these guys face, I think, going forward. And because of that, I'd just stay back. I'd trade it, but I'd stay back as far as any long-term. I think this is an opportunity down here because I don't think this is the bottom just yet.
Well, and then let's give them one last stock, Pete, with some good news, because data storage, we all know about data centers, demand for electricity, some of the cloud plays that are involved with that. But then you've got Seagate, which is really storage of the data and so forth. they came out with some very strong earnings. On the stock, it's up to, it traded as high as $90 today, Pete. That's $30 off the low, almost $30 off the low, not of the day, but the 52-week low. And this looks like WDC, Western Digital, looked like they had a great report, but Seagate is what people really grabbed onto and said, I want to own that one.
Yeah, WDC had a nice pop, but nothing even close to what we're seeing out of Seagate. And Seagate put up some great numbers. Their forecast looked outstanding for revenue, John. And when you look at the earnings, 220 to 260 is what they put out there. It was at 210. So across the board, they've done a great job. Obviously, you just brought it up. It's about storage. It's about data storage. I think these guys absolutely delivered this quarter in the right way. They needed to do that. By the way, one of the comments that I thought was pretty interesting, they said limited global tariff impact for the next quarter. So I liked hearing that because they're not going with any excuses. They're going right at it and telling us exactly how things look right now.
Yeah, well, I think Seagate is one that you want to keep an eye on, Pete, because it's not a flash in the pan. This is not a new company, folks. Most of you know this one's been around at least as long as Western Dig, and both of them in the data storage space, Pete. So I like the fact that they didn't just whine about tariffs and lack of visibility. So that was pretty cool.
By the way, a PE of 9, John, single digits.
9.
PE is 9. Yeah, not bad.
I like that also. All right, well, let's take a quick look, Pete, at this video. We know it's one of your favorite parts of the show, folks, when we actually flash up a little video. And Colin Cowart, the herd, is about to describe some things that I think a lot of us thought about this when we watched the NFL draft.
So a lot of times when you go to these combine meetings, teams give you things to challenge you. Teams will have a player's worst players.
Nobody talked about this during the draft itself, by the way.
No. Say, hey, why don't you explain them? And Shedeur apparently didn't take to it well. And at one point, one of the few teams that actually was interested in him said, well, what do you make of this really bad play? And Shedeur said, maybe I'm not the guy for you.
Maybe I'm not the guy for you.
That's not the answer.
That's another a really bad answer.
What they do during the film and the combine and the meetings is teams will install mistakes intentionally planted in the install, and they want you to catch them. Shedeur didn't, and when a coach called him out, once again, it didn't sit well.
These players got to get coached into how the interviews go, man.
Especially since Pittsburgh appears to have a deal with Aaron Rodgers and Tennessee's getting Cam Ward. So you're down to the Giants, who were not interested at all, and Cleveland, who traded out of that 2 spot because clearly they were looking for next year's class like the Rams are.
And that's where we're going, John. We're talking about next year's class. I think the way Cowart set it up was absolutely perfect. But you had something you were going to say. What were you going to say?
No, I think that it is reasonable, Pete, for them to say, okay, rather than, everybody just telling you you're the greatest thing since sliced bread, what if somebody says, do you think you got room for improvement in this part of your game? Yes, the kid's got a cannon of an arm. He really does. Yep. And some people going into the draft were saying, well, he didn't throw, so we don't really know. Yeah, you did. If you watched his pro day, he could zip it 70 yards, just like all of them can be. Yeah. I mean, he's got the skills, but it's it's in his head and his attitude that I think is the issue. But let me let you go to next year's class of quarterbacks.
And I would say an attitude like he's shown so far is not an attitude that very many teams want to have because you can't have that, man. That's a disruption. If things go south, that's a big disruption in the future. All right, John, I just thought it's never too early to go up to next year's draft. So I put together a top 5 or 6 group. So here's what we've got. We've got Arch Manning. We got Newsmeyer, who's down at LSU. Probably not a lot of people really are not familiar with him. Heck of a player, and this kid's got a great arm. This kid Sellers over at South Carolina has really been having a lot of people jump onto him, watching film on him. He's pretty special, John. And South Carolina has done a lot of things in a good way. Just building up that football program has been really impressive. Drew Aller at Penn State is special. I've stood next to this kid. He's as big as a house. He looks like a tight end. He can throw the ball. He can sling it. He can put it all over the place. The kid down at Clemson, Klubnik, is pretty interesting too. people forget about Clemson. I don't know why. Clemson still plays great football. They still have this great coach. They have players everywhere. He stays a lot away from the portal, so I think that does take Clemson away from some of the media coverage because of what they do and everything else. And then Carson Beck down at Miami, John, who's transferring from Georgia, or transferred to from Georgia. This one, I think, is a pretty damn deep group, right? I mean, almost every name I put out there, I'd say even the casual fan is going to know who these guys are. Obviously, as we get into the season, others will probably join these guys. I think this might be as deep a quarterback class as we had last year. And I thought this year's was not as bad as everybody else. I actually thought we had some pretty damn good quarterbacks in there, including Shedeur. I think at some point he will be able to answer the bell, but he does need a little bit of work. But what do you think of that? And is there any names? Do you got any sleepers out there, John? I don't know. I looked around a little bit. I think there's a few, but that's a good list of quarterbacks, I think, for next year.
Yeah, and I think they all got a lesson from Shedeur, Pete.
Yeah.
So Arch Manning, I'm not saying that Arch, he's obviously got his father, his uncles that wouldn't let him go down that same road as Shedeur unfortunately chose to go down.
Mm-hmm.
You're a cocky kid, that's okay. If you back it up, that's okay. But then to disregard what the coaches are saying, like, well, when you look at this, Shedeur, do you see anything you might be doing wrong? Or how would you improve this? And you just say instead, maybe I'm not your guy. No, that's not the answer. And I don't think Arch will go down that road, Pete. Arch Manning down at Texas. And I think the one you really got to worry about, the one whose stock has fallen the most so far, is Nico out at UCLA.
Yeah.
He's going to really have a year, Pete, at UCLA, and he's going to have to take that, either his ego or his dad's tutelage, and throw them both away and just say, I'm a team guy.
Yep.
I'm going to do what's best for the team, and so forth and so on, rather than saying, well, I was only going to make 2.4 mil and I need to make 4. And now he's making a heck of a lot less than the 2.4 he would have made at Tennessee. And by the way, he's not on as good a team at UCLA. And he alone isn't the guy that's going to turn UCLA, Pete. So if that team ends up going, whatever, Pete, 6-7 or whatever it is, he is not going to get the same kind of looks that he had or that he would have got at Tennessee.
Yeah, I think bad tutelage from his father. And his father had a play-in with his brother as well, who originally went to UCLA as his commitment. Then he decides to go to Arkansas. Then he comes back to UCLA. And then the UCLA quarterback who now goes to Tennessee. I mean, what a great trade that was for him. He probably is the happiest guy in the world. He's playing on one of the best teams in all of college football now. So not so bad for him. John, one last thing that I thought we could hit real quick was, so the NCAA, we obviously have this portal, and there are dates where the portal is open. And now this is the spring portal, obviously, going on right now. But I had a couple of numbers for you that I thought you might find interesting. So West Virginia is one of them. The exodus leaving West Virginia and a fairly historic coach, 25 players have already hit the portal in the springtime. 25. There's only, let's say there's 100. There might be because of walk-ons and whatever else, but you got 100 players out there. 25 of them say, well, I'm out of here. Auburn, same problem. 21 guys have left. Stanford, they not only lost a lot of players, John, somewhere in the 20s, but the new GM actually fired the head coach, Troy Taylor. So not only are they losing guys to the portal, they're losing guys that they had to fire. So Stanford's up in the air right now in the ACC, only followed by Cal, who lost 5 running backs to the portal and 18 offensive players to the portal. So and you know what? And you can't always read into it, because maybe they were okay with these guys leaving. Maybe they weren't right for Cal or for Stanford or whatever school it is. But it is amazing to see, John, how these guys, they just start going for the doors, and they're moving on and looking for another NIL payday or whatever it is. I hope in most cases they're just going somewhere where they have a better opportunity to play. If they're doing it for that reason, I get it. But if they're doing it for money, or they're trying to, do it for whatever other reasons come up, I just think that they're using this portal. They're overusing the portal. And can you imagine being a head coach at at Cal, and all of a sudden you've got 20 plus of your offensive players walk away to the portal. I mean, holy crap.
Yeah, well, Pete, I looked at some data, and the data shows that up to 25%, in other words, 1 in 4 players on a college football team are considering the portal. Now, that is, given that you're talking roughly in rough numbers, Pete, 95 or 100 players on a team, you're talking about 25 players. And for the most part, most of those players are either starters or sharing time with somebody else. There are a few of them that are leaving because they're not getting any playing time. And we both agree with that. I think that they should then try to go someplace where they think they can play. But for the starters and or the ones sharing time, or like you said, just people like Nico that thought that they could get more money, that, some team out there would pay him a lot of money. And by the way, Pete, nothing against Nico, but he is a little skinny dude.
Yeah.
He needs to get in the weight room. He needs to put on some weight. And because I don't think that guy can make it through an NFL season with those skinny little arms and everything else. Yeah. He was able to play very high level at a great team. We'll see if he can play high level at a not so great team at UCLA.
Yeah, far more average team than great. Tennessee was unbelievable last year. Look at how many guys got drafted and everything. By the way, the last thing I'll say on the portal, when you decide you're going in the portal, John, you've basically told your scholarship, rip. And if you don't get picked up, now what? Right? I mean, so there's a gamble there that these guys are willing to take that I think is a little bit crazy, because you know what? Sometimes you don't realize what you've got until you lose it. And that's a problem.
Yeah. And those scholarships, folks, are $70,000 to $100,000 per year. Because again, despite NIL and them getting paid, they're also getting free school, room and board, and probably books and everything else. So
unreal.
Anyway, well, thanks for joining us today, folks. We always appreciate you joining the Rebels Edge. We will be back tomorrow with another Rebels Edge at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Make sure you check out all the offerings at marketrebellion.com because we've got a lot of great education. We've got webinars. We've got free distance learning, meaning you could open up the computer, your iPad, or even on your iPhone on your way home when you're commuting or whatever, and listen or watch something that'll make you a better informed investor. So check out marketrebellion.com, and Pete and I will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern.